Everybody, it is 7 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call the special meeting of the Northern Illinois Municipal Power Agency to order. The first item on our agenda tonight is roll call, and I'll do that a little differently tonight in the form of introduction so that you know who is all here. From the city of Batavia, I've been talking to you, but you don't know who I am. My name is Gary Hall. I'm actually Batavia's Director Representative to the NIMPA Board. Sorry, everyone. I'm going to use this so that BATV. The recording, the meeting is not tonight being recorded on our local television station, so it will be available via YouTube link once the meeting is over with. I'll repeat. My name is Gary Holm. I'm the director from City of Batavia. The alternate from Batavia is Rahat Bari. From the City of Geneva tonight, Aaron Holton is here, and he is their director representative. Rich Babica is their alternate, and he's not here this evening. From Rochelle, we have Jeff Figgenshoe, who is their director representative, and then Blake Tolliver, who is their alternate. So all of us comprise then the NIMPA board. Also with us tonight, we do have our consultants and advisors, starting with Richard Heineman. Richard Heineman is NIMPA's legal counsel. He's from Boardman and Clark out of Madison, Wisconsin. Elizabeth Zrelek. Elizabeth just joined us this past December. She provides administrative and secretarial services to the agency. Dominic Lanzito. Dominic provides advocacy services with Van Buren Consulting out of Chicago. And then we have representatives here this evening from Avant Energy. Avant Energy is a firm out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. David Niles is a Senior Vice President for Financial and Accounting Matters. Noah Hansen is Vice President for Energy Market Operations. Joe Foliero, Vice President for Electric Plant Operations, provides us with technical guidance related to power plants. And finally, Anshu who is Avant's Chief Operating Officer. Also tonight, we do have representatives with us, and I'm going to turn it over to Laura Newman, who's our City Administrator, for introductions.
Yes, so joining us tonight live is State Representative Barbara Hernandez from the Illinois 50th District. And then online, we have Representative Bradley Fritz from the Illinois 74th and Senator Bill Cunningham.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda tonight is a presentation. The presentation is titled NIMPA 101, Facts About the Agency. We're giving this presentation this evening to provide information about NIMPA as a joint action agency. It's our understanding that in the coming weeks in Springfield, potential legislation is going to be introduced that relates to joint action agencies and Illinois cooperatives. And so we wanted to provide information tonight so that everyone who considers legislation can make the most educated decisions possible. I'm going to start talking a little bit about NIMPA's history and how we came to be and where we are today. And I'm going to start with the Electric Service Customer Choice and Rate Relief Act of 1997, which is admittedly an obscure place to start. But this act is critical in that it was the catalyst that led to the ultimate formation of NIMPA and ultimately where we are today. Under that act, the state of Illinois declared that generation assets and transmission and distribution assets were no longer allowed to be joint or owned by the same company. So in Northern Illinois, Exelon assumed ownership of the generation assets and ComEd assumed ownership of transmission and distribution. Now, why that was critical is that prior to this passage of this act, ComEd would provide municipals with what we called full requirement services. So as a municipal electric, all we would do is cut one check to ComEd every month. And ComEd would provide us with energy, transmission, distribution. They would provide us with all services that we needed. Under this act, starting in 2007, ComEd was no longer allowed to do that. So the municipals needed to plan on their own for all those services I just mentioned. So starting in the late 1990s, early 2000s, Batavia, Geneva, and Rochelle each began planning efforts at their own individual municipalities for that transition away from ComEd. The three communities all wanted to pool resources so they could get better buying power and lower costs for their members, but at the same time, none of the communities wanted to relinquish their local control for resource planning, rate making, or administration of their respective utilities. NIMPA was ultimately formed in 2004, and it was established as a project-based joint action agency, and Richard Heineman will talk a little bit more about what that means in a few minutes. But the founding members were Batavia, Geneva, Rochelle, and Geneseo. For those of you who don't know where Geneseo is, it's a small community out in the western part of the state, close to Iowa. Batavia, Geneva, and Rochelle had formed NIMPA with a strong desire to pursue generation ownership, to become an owner of a generator. Geneseo, again, kept their own individual resource planning, just like all the other communities, and through their own individual decisions, they decided in 2005 to not pursue the same projects, and so they withdrew from the agency. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Richard to talk a little bit about the structure and how NIMPA operates.
I'll just, okay. Or do you want me to use that microphone? Would that be better for, is it okay if I use that? Okay, great. So good evening. So yes, I'm the general counsel for NIMPA, and I was there at the beginning. In fact, I'm the person who developed the agency agreement that all the members signed to become part of the agency. So I can tell you about how that all came about and what it all means. As soon as I figure out how to operate this. There we go. So Gary talked about, can you hear me now? Is that better? Okay. Gary talked about joint action, and that's what a joint action agency is. So when we formed the agency back in 2004, we had a statute to look at which guided us. The Illinois Joint Municipal Electric Power Act was promulgated, I believe, in the late 1990s, right around the time that Gary's talking about when all this started to happen and the entire industry became restructured, not just in Illinois, but elsewhere. And the Joint Powers Act, essentially, that's what we refer to in shorthand, tells you tells municipalities how they can become part of a joint action agency. And it starts by telling what the whole purpose is, right? What is the purpose of joint action? The purpose of joint action is to allow municipal utilities to band together and take advantage, synergize, right? Pool together, participate together so that they can develop projects. And projects can be everything or anything. It doesn't have to be a big generation plant. It can be any form of electric power supply. It can be distribution, transmission services, a whole range of things, and it's all laid out in the statute. And what kind of an entity is a joint action agency? It's really a local governmental unit. That's what it is. It has all the powers that local governments, municipal governments like Batavia have, except for taxation, right? And the statute lays that out. So all the sovereign immunities that Batavia enjoys, for example, everything, all the rights that accrue to a municipality can also accrue to a joint action agency. So the statute lays out what the scope of the agency's operations can be, what it can do legally, right, and what it can't do. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but one thing, just like Batavia and Geneva and Rochelle, has to subscribe to the open meetings rules, adhere to the open records rules, and all the things that ensure transparency in Illinois. So as a local governmental unit, NIMPA is subject to all those same things. So it also, the agency statute kind of lays out certain other things that a joint action agency has to adhere to. So it has to have a principal office in Illinois. NIMPA's principal office is in Rochelle, as it turns out. It has certain, it can lay out through bylaws the ways in which the municipal members can join the agency. And in NIMPA's case, what we decided to do back then was to have a board of directors with a director and an alternate from each member community. And that's also dictated by the statute, by the way, that each member gets to designate one director and can also have an alternate, right? It's not the case, according to the statute, that an individual member can have 2 representatives, for example. So that's all laid out in the statute, and it's reflected in our bylaws. And then directors and alternates are appointed by and are directly accountable to their respective communities' mayor and city council. And that's really critical. That's really critical from the agency standpoint. Gary touched on this also. Local control. The whole point of having the agency set up the way that it has been set up is to allow the member communities, through their representatives that are appointed by the city council, to have impact, influence on the direction of the agency. And so in joining NIMPA, the individual member communities did not give up their rights as municipal electric utilities to basically dictate their power supply, right? All of those decisions, basically, the accountability is the key word here, right? The appointed representatives on the NIMPA board of directors are accountable to their governing bodies. That has always been the case and will always remain the case for NIMPA and for every joint action agency. Also, this particular agency does not have staff members. It could, if it wanted to, could have employees. We just hired Elizabeth on a part-time basis. We could have a full-time employee. If we wanted to, we could have a full-time CEO and pay the CEO. We don't, but we could. The statute provides for that. It's just that's not a direction that this particular agency has chosen to take. Project-based agency. Gary also alluded to this. Let me talk a little bit about that. What is a project agency? There's a fundamental distinction in joint action agency world between full requirements agencies and project-based agencies. A full requirements agency is set up to take care of all the power supply needs of its members, right? So IMEA, which is also set up under this very same statute, is a full requirements agency, okay? And so what that means is that IMEA is responsible for everything pertaining to its member communities, including power supply planning, resource planning. In NIMPA's case, NIMPA doesn't do resource planning. It could, but it has chosen not to. As a project-based agency, what NIMPA does is it implements the projects that come from the member communities. So when the member communities decide that they're interested in owning generation, which was the case at the beginning of the agency's formation, they decide to do that and have the agency take advantage of joint action in order to make that happen. In the case of Prairie State, for example, right? There could be other projects, however. I mean, if the NIMPA member communities decided that they wanted to do wind generation or solar generation, and they thought it was advantageous to do it together, as opposed to maybe something more locally, they could do that through the agency. But as a project agency, NIMPA wouldn't have to do it for everybody. If Rochelle was not interested in participating in a solar project, but Batavia and Geneva were, then that would proceed as a separate project. And it would be handled and accounted for and paid for ultimately separately. So that's the difference between a full requirements agency and a project-based agency. So I mentioned, unlike full requirements agencies, NIMPA does not have long-term management contracts with its member communities. What that means, what management contracts means is we don't have a CEO and a whole paid staff whose job it is to take care of all of these different power supply related needs of the constituent members. We don't do that. We do it on a project basis. What we do is we engage Avant to assist us if, for example, we wanted to evaluate the possibility or the advantages of doing a solar project or A transmission project, we would have Avant run the numbers for us and make a determination whether that makes sense or not. And then the individual members would basically decide whether or not they wanted to proceed. It would be up to them, right? That's in contrast to what a full requirements agency would do, where basically the decisions are made, in the boardroom, by the CEO and the other senior managers of the agency. That's not how NIMPA operates. Instead, the NIMPA member communities basically follow the policies and the direction of their elected officials. It's when the folks in Batavia decide that, okay, we want to do X, we want to pursue solar, we want to pursue wind, let's see whether or not it makes sense to do it jointly with the other NIMPA communities. They'll let their designated representative know that, Gary, and Gary may bring that project to the board of directors. That happened a few years ago. Gary will talk about that in a bit with respect to a wind project. But basically, it's the member communities following the direction of their elected officials, right, and the accountability to them and ultimately to the communities themselves. That's how decisions are made for NIMPA. So as I said earlier, NIMPA is a public agency. It's an arm of local government, so it's subject to the Open Meetings Act and to the Open Records Act. And as some of you know, in NIMPA's case, we try to be responsive to citizens when questions are raised, when there's a desire to see open records. Just last month, a request came in to hear the audio recordings of the NIMPA meeting in December. We are responsive to those, and we try to provide those materials when requested. A few months ago, before that, questions were raised about how our agendas were structured, and we, in dialogue with the citizen who raised that question, ultimately determined that it made sense to change the way that our agendas looked in order to meet that concern. So when questions are raised, NIMPA tries to be responsive the way that any local governmental unit would be to those concerns. Again, as a local governmental body, our meetings are open to the public. You can see the agendas on our website. The meeting location, in our case, rotates. We only have 3 members. We try to kind of keep things even, so we rotate it so that they take place every third month in the 3-member communities. And under Illinois law, you have to have certain physical presence requirements met for those meetings. And because NIMPA engages people like me who don't live in Illinois, and people like David and his colleagues at Avant, in the recent past, we have had a lot of the meeting participation take place through Teams or through Zoom virtually. That allows us to participate without having to drive. It saves costs from an administrative standpoint, just makes it a little bit more efficient for us. So our meetings are always held via Teams, as well as taking place live in either one or any one of the NIMPA member communities. In accordance with the requirements of the Joint Action Agency law, NIMPA holds an annual meeting once a year. The law actually dictates when that meeting can be, not the exact date, but the time frame in which it takes place. So we try to stay within that. And certain things have to take place at that annual meeting: board officer elections, the annual budget approval, and the adoption of a monthly meeting calendar, or at least a regular meeting calendar, which can change from time to time, but at least at that point, at the annual meeting, we make a decision how things are going to go in the coming year. Now, this is one of the unfortunate realities of NIMPA as a 3-member agency with 3 representatives who generally are the same, but for retirements. Unfortunately, Gary, as president, generally speaking, retains that office every year. Under the bylaws, we come up, we don't have, bylaws can be structured different ways, right? We could have the president have it serve a term for 5 years. In NIMPA's case, we've just kept it that there's no rotation. There's just an election every year, and then we decide who's going to be the president, who's going to be the vice president, who's going to be the treasurer. And Gary, unfortunately, has drawn the short end of the stick pretty regularly over the last few years. Of course, we would say it's because he's doing such a great job, and that's why he keeps getting elected. But there's only 3 members to choose from, so there's not a lot of options. So I think you're going to be stuck with Gary for the near future anyway. We also have a website, www.nimpaonline.org. I just took a look at it before the meeting. There's a lot of information there. Everything you need. You got your agency agreement, you got your bylaws, quarterly financials, audit statements. So that is a resource if any of you want to take a look and look at the original formation document, the agency agreement or the bylaws. It's there on the website. And then we also have a link to information associated with Prairie State, which at this point is our only generating resource. So that's it for now. Gary, you're on.
Thank you, Richard. As Richard has just been touching on, NIMPA is a project-based agency, and over NIMPA's existence, NIMPA has had 3 separate projects. As some of you might be aware, back in 2008, NIMPA, through Geneva, Rochelle, and Batavia, explored wind generation out in Rochelle. The project was called the Eagle View Wind Generation Project. And it was, again, it went through the preliminary planning stages to explore whether wind would be viable in Rochelle. About 18 months into the project, Batavia had elected to withdraw from that project in late 2009, and then in early 2010, both Geneva and Rochelle also elected to withdraw. And so when all 3 communities withdrew, the project really never progressed past that initial planning stage. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see Interstate 39, and those yellow boxes, that's just where the wind turbines were proposed to go, kind of north and south of Highway 64 out in Rochelle. I mentioned at the start of the presentation that 2007, municipalities no longer were able to get full requirement services under ComEd. So between 2007 and 2012, we all had to procure our own energy to meet our own individual needs. So in 2009, Batavia and Rochelle joined forces in an effort to get better prices for our members, and we basically went out and procured an energy contract. That energy contract concluded, or that project concluded when the energy contract expired in 2012. So that was an example of a project that was started for just a contract, and it ran a couple years, and then the project ended. Finally, our 3rd project, which is still ongoing, and that's the Prairie State Generating Company. Really at the formation of NIMPA, way back in 2004, if not even a little bit before 2004, the members began to explore Prairie State. But the final agreements were not struck until 2007, and so that's why I have listed 2007 up there to the present. Prairie State's a 1,600 megawatt coal-fired generating facility located just southeast of St. Louis and Marissa, Illinois. There's a mine, coal combustion residual monofill on the campus, and NIMPA owns 7.6%, or about 120 megawatts of output from that facility. And there's just a brief picture of Prairie State. I'm going to actually turn it right back over to Richard, who's going to talk about NIMPA's power sales agreements that it has with its member communities in support of Prairie State.
So the power sales agreements are the principal instrument by which NIMPA as an agency procures the output from the Prairie State plant to the 3 members. And you can think of them essentially as, they're called power sales agreement. I would think of them essentially as unit purchase agreements, right? Which is that what they provide for is that all of the output from the Prairie State plant is provided for the member. That means capacity, energy, anything pertaining to transmission, everything involved in the operation of the plant, up to that member's entitlement share. And back in the day, when the three-member communities were deciding how to participate in Prairie State, they also had decisions to make in terms of how much they wanted to participate. And so they each have different entitlement shares. Batavia has 55 megawatts, Geneva has 35 megawatts, Rochelle has 30 megawatts. So that basically defines the slice of the Prairie State pie that NIMPA owns, right? And it owns its slice of the Prairie State pie with other joint action agencies, IMEA, as some of you know, but also joint action agencies and electric cooperatives, not only in Illinois, but other states as well. And NIMPA is a joint owner of that, along with those other power agencies and electric co-ops. So the power sales agreement had to be designed to provide comfort to bondholders. So the power sales agreement has a number of features that were necessary in order to ensure that the agency could finance its ownership share in the plant. So what it provides for is that each member community has to pay all the expenses associated with their entitlement share, which, as I said, includes everything from the generation itself, capital improvements associated with the plant, replacement energy and/or capacity for those periods of time when the plant can't run because there's an outage, either a forced outage or an unforced outage. Nonetheless, NIMPA as an agency is obligated to make sure that the members get up to their entitlement share of the capacity and energy during those times. And so every year there'll be purchases that are made through the market or otherwise, sometimes bilaterally, in order to provide replacement energy and capacity. That's an obligation of the agency, right? The members signed on because they wanted assurance that they were going to get every kilowatt hour and kilowatt slash month of capacity associated with its entitlement share of the plant. And so when the plant's not operating, NIMPA has to provide that. But conversely, the member has to pay, right? And so that's one of the features that the bondholders were looking for. They wanted a very strong agreement that made sure that the members would pay, even if the plant wasn't running. And so then in addition, you've got transmission, congestion, legal, administrative, and advisory services, bond obligations, everything that's associated with the ownership share that NIMPA has is provided for and paid for ultimately by the three-member communities. So that obligation, right, accrues to the member as the member itself individually. That's what it means when it says, and this is the language from the agreement itself, that each member's obligation to make payments is a several obligation. It's not a joint and several, right? It's not an obligation that is shared with the other members. It is individual to the member itself. And it's secured by a pledge of the electric revenues that come from the payment. In other words, the bonds are secured by each member's pledge of the electric revenues that it pays, that it gives to the agency for the power that it receives. And the document makes it very, very clear. The power sales agreement makes it very clear that that's an operating expense, so it's a priority expense for the member, and it can't come from the member's general obligation, can't come from property tax revenue. The member's payment obligations are required whether or not the project is operable or operated or otherwise suspended, interrupted, interfered with, or curtailed for any reason. Again, that was an assurance that was necessary in order to provide bondholders ultimately with the assurance that they needed that the member payments could be counted on going forward. How long is the power sales agreement? This is one of the most complicated provisions in the agreement, and I probably read it dozens and dozens of times, and I wish it could be clearer, but it is what it is, right? It's the earlier of 50 years or the later of essentially the bonds or the longevity of NIMPA's participation in the project. And then a couple of other features that I thought were important to highlight: that members are constrained from taking unilateral action with regards to disposition of any of the agencies interested in the project. So when it comes to running the project, it really is one for all for one. I mean, if Batavia wanted to pull out, it couldn't just unilaterally elect to do that. Any disposition of the agency's interest requires the consent of everybody, of all three members. So now we'll turn it over to Dave to talk in a little more detail about the bonds themselves.
So good evening. My name is David Niles. I'm with Avant Energy, and Avant provides energy market operations, finance and accounting services, and project advisory services to NIMPA, and we've done that since late 2015, so for about the past 8 years. I'm going to start by talking about the bonds today. So as Richard was talking about, in support of the agency's purchase of a 7.6% undivided interest in Prairie State, NIMPA issued revenue bonds in 2007, 2009, and 2010. That first issuance in 2007 was your traditional tax-exempt municipal bonds. And in 2009 and 2010, those bonds were taxable Build America bonds. And that was a new product that arose at that time when we were in the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. The traditional tax-exempt market dried up. People weren't buying and selling bonds because of all the uncertainty and instability in the financial markets. And so these Build America bonds were taxable bonds with the federal government providing a subsidy similar to the interest deduction that you would get on typical municipal tax-exempt bonds. And so the approximate annual bond obligation for each member, and these amounts are proportionate to the purchase amount that each member is purchasing from NIMPA that Richard reviewed a few minutes ago. And so Batavia's annual bond obligation, that's principal and interest, is about $15 million. Geneva's is about $9.5 million, and Rochelle's about $8 million. All of NIMPA's bond obligations are planned to be fully satisfied at the end of 2041. And the agency is committed to meeting its Prairie State contractual and bond obligations along the lines that Richard was talking about. So this graph here shows the total amount of NIMPA bonds outstanding as of December 31st, so the end of each year, in millions of dollars. And so you can see where we are right now. We're at about $380 million as of the end of 2023. And it steps down pretty much ratably, as you can see, all the way down through the end of 2041 when that amount's zero. So I also want to talk about stewardship and accountability. So some of the things that NIMPA has done to help keep rates low for its members. So in 2016, the agency successfully executed an advance refunding of its 2007 bonds, which resulted in ongoing annual savings of $3 million in interest expense, which, when you'll see in a minute here, that's not an insubstantial amount for an entity the size of NIMPA, and total net present value savings over the life of the transaction of over $50 million. And the agency has pledged to investigate and determine if it'll make financial sense to execute another refunding in 2026. So as part of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the ability of municipal bond issuers like NIMPA and its members to advance refund bonds was taken away. And so NIMPA can only do a current refunding, meaning that NIMPA can only refund those bonds within 90 days of the call date of those bonds. So that's why that option isn't available until 2026. So what I really want to emphasize tonight is NIMPA's commitment to providing its member communities with long-term, stable, and low-cost power. And part of that transparency is that these financials are reviewed and approved by the board at regular monthly meetings. We also take the board through energy market transactions and power plant operations, and those are summarized at each regular meeting. And then NIMPA also issues an annual financial audit presented each April. And as was referred to earlier, that audit is on NIMPA's website. And I want to show that NIMPA has really delivered on that commitment, and that's shown here in the graph of NIMPA's rates to members from 2013, the first full year of operations of Prairie State, to the 2024 budget. And what you can see is that there's been some variability, but in a time of where energy prices have risen much faster than general rates of inflation, NIMPA's rate to members has been pretty steady, and in fact, the highest rates were in the earliest years of NIMPA's operation. So during an inflationary time, NIMPA's been able to keep rates stable and in fact decrease. And what you can see here is the blue part of the graph is NIMPA's debt service cost. Again, that's principal and interest on the bonds. And then the green are all the other costs of the agency. So one of the components of NIMPA's rate structure to its members is an energy cost adjustment. And that's used, again, to minimize member rate volatility. So it goes back to that commitment to stable rates. And so each month, the difference between the revenues received from member rates and the agency's actual costs, whether it's positive or negative, if the revenues are more or if the costs are more, that difference goes into an ECA account, again, energy cost adjustment. And the board periodically reviews the ECA account balance and makes rate adjustments if necessary. If things vary, if costs move too far away from where the budget was, then rates adjustments are made. So if the ECA account balance is positive, meaning revenues have been higher than costs, then excess funds are returned to members. And if the account balance is negative, meaning costs have been higher than revenues received, then rates to members are increased to make up that shortfall. And so we've seen both sides of this happen in NIMPA's history. So you saw early on, the early years were when costs were higher, and NIMPA actually carried a negative ECA balance from 2012 to 2014. If it had charged rates that were equal to its costs, those graphs in those first few years would have actually even been a little higher than they were. And then in more recent years, 2017 to 2022, and then again this year, NIMPA has been returning some of those excess ECA funds when rates collected were in excess of NIMPA's costs. And so being able to return those rates to members is something that NIMPA is happy to do. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Gary to offer some concluding remarks about the agency's future.
Thank you both. As David said, I'm going to wrap things up tonight by talking about NIMPA's agency future. As an agency, NIMPA is committed to continue its pursuit with that long-term, stable, low-cost power. And as Richard mentioned, and it's very important that we meet all of our legal, contractual, and our bond obligations. Finally, and Richard mentioned this earlier in the presentation, if NIMPA's members, 1, 2, or 3 of its members decide to pursue projects, NIMPA, the agency, will continue to serve as a resource in support of member-initiated projects. We'll continue to conduct our work in accordance with the Open Meetings Act and the FOIA. We'll continue to retain local control. Remember, I told you way back in the late 1990s and 2000s when the communities knew that they had to get away from ComEd, the one thing they did not want to give up is local control of resource planning, rate-making authority, and administration of their respective utilities. NIMPA does not perform those functions for its members. Its members perform those functions for themselves and are directly accountable to their mayors and city councils. Citizens of NIMPA's member communities are able to literally pick up the phone, call the mayor, call the city council members, email them, come in and meet with them. And I would challenge any of those citizens to be able to do that with ComEd's board of director and CEO. I don't think that you would have a meeting tomorrow with the CEO like you can, literally with our mayor, have a meeting tomorrow. And so citizens have a direct voice in utility matters through the people that they elect, their mayors and their city councils, and then their mayors and city councils appoint us to the NIMPA board. I will turn it over to questions and comments. One final remark before I do, and again, I'm going to circle back to one of my opening statements, and that was that in the coming weeks in Springfield, it's very possible that legislation will be introduced concerning joint action agencies like NIMPA, concerning electrical co-ops, and tonight's presentation was meant to provide information about the agency. You'll notice we didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about the agency's projects. We touched on them, and we certainly touched on the power sales agreements and the bonds in support of the project. But again, our focus tonight was on the agency and as it potentially could relate to future legislation. So if you have questions on those matters, we'd be happy to answer any of those questions. If you have questions specific to NIMPA's projects, I'm going to show you our email addresses. You're welcome to reach out to us via email. Right after this, we're going to talk about having a February meeting because we didn't have a February meeting on our calendar. We can dive into any project-specific questions in more detail that night. But if you have questions, we can take whatever questions you have. I would just ask if we could focus tonight on the agency, because that was really the intention of the NIMPA 101 facts about the agency presentation. So with that, again, I'll leave our email addresses up there for questions in case people want to email us. Richard, David, and I are going to retreat back to the dais so that there's a better dialogue with whoever wants to come up. I'll grab that list of people who have signed up.
And I can walk around with the mic if you want
You want to do that instead of going to the podium? Okay. I'll do this in case someone wants to go to the podium. And then I'll grab that list and we'll announce names and
Just raise your hand.
yeah.
I think it's your face.
Doesn't matter. Thank you. And I know some of you, again, did sign this list, and then you subsequently indicated you're not interested in speaking, and that's perfectly fine. I'll simply go through the list of people who have signed up, and then if there's somebody whose name is not on here and you want to speak, that's certainly fine too. So I will start with, is it Rosie and Pat McClure? We don't have questions. Okay, thank you very much. Then the next one that's not scratched off is a Miss Patty Lockman. Lockman? I don't have a question either. All right, thank you. Going down then, there's a Jonathan Cunningham. Okay, thank you very much. And Barbara, and I apologize, I can't read your last name. Hernandez, I'm sorry, that's State Representative Hernandez. Thank you. Ralph, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name. Thank you. You're welcome to come on up.
My name is Ralph Pasquinelli. I'm a resident of Batavia for 45 years now and a retired electrical engineer at Fermilab for 38 of those years. I have a number of questions on the downstate plant. Is it a peaker plant or is it on full-time?
That's a baseload generation facility, so it's on full-time.
What is on full-time?
Yeah.
And we've had it since 2007, and unfortunately, like was said about you, and I hope it's not true that we're stuck with you, but we're stuck with this until 2040. Now, what I've noticed on my own electrical bill is that my personal bill, I'm paying 17 cents per kilowatt hour right now. That's not only the cost of electricity, but it's the cost of distribution, taxes, and everything else, which of course in your bar graph is exactly that blue stuff underneath the green stuff. And that bar graph didn't show necessarily the electrical cost, but it looked, if I did the division right, it's like 6 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour. So we are paying substantially more than that. And that's pretty bothersome to me. Okay,
Can I jump in on two things?
Sure.
And then I'll let you keep asking questions, but as opposed to, this way we can tackle them one at a time. You had mentioned NIMPA will be done in like 2040, or Prairie State will be done in 2040. Richard tried to cover that. That's a very complicated part of our power sales agreement. It's actually either at the end of the bonds, or if Prairie State is still operating, it's at the end of its involvement with Prairie State. So it'll be beyond 2040.
right. And according to what he said, you can't really get out very easily. We're stuck with it.
So, and then
Can you use your
I didn't
words?
say you were stuck with it, but yes, you can't get out of it very
You
easily.
can't get out.
With
That
regards
sounds like
to your-
stuck with it, isn't it? A little bit. Does anybody disagree? I think it sounds like you're stuck with it.
With regards to your individual energy bill, electric bill, that'll vary on which community. You're a Batavia resident,
Right.
but Geneva residents and Rochelle residents will have different local distribution charges, if you will. NIMPA does publish, and it's on the City of Batavia's website, an annual rate comparison survey. And if you look at that rate comparison survey, Batavia is finally in recent years not at the top anymore.
Well, but that's okay, but it's 17 cents per kilowatt hour, and I'm not privy to what St. Charles pays, or I have friends who are on ComEd still. ComEd also allows you to have the capability of getting a power meter regulator, so if I want to wash my dishes between 10 o'clock at night and 5 o'clock in the morning, I could have a much lower rate. And sometimes the rate approaches zero, especially in the winter. Now, in the summer, if I want to turn my air conditioner up at night to cool it down, okay, I also would run it at night and save a lot of money. Batavia, if it does have it, it's not well advertised.
Yeah, we do
and I
not
know
have
nothing
time of
about
day
that.
rates, and that's just a function of rate structure. That's just a
Well,
time
we
of day
should
rate.
get that in Batavia, Mr. Mayor, over there, is because, the whole idea, it's a coal-fired plant, which everyone is trying to get away from fossil fuel, but clearly Batavia is not getting away from fossil fuel for the next 2 decades, at least, okay? So we should all be trying to save electricity by having these power-saving capabilities that ComEd gives to their customers should be afforded to us in Batavia, Geneva, Rochelle, whoever else they buy their electricity from.
Just so we're clear too, that ComEd's refrigerator rebates, ComEd's time of day rate, those are all customer-funded initiatives. They're not, ComEd is not graciously out of their profit margin giving those things away.
I understand, but their intention is if you don't have to have peaker plants running so that you have people start conserving energy, that's the way we should be going for the future. I don't see that in any of the NIMPA plans right here. And I would really like an explanation of, from that bar graph of 6 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour, how it turns out to be 17 cents on my bill every month. Because there's no explanation of that anywhere.
So purchase power, I can only speak for Batavia. Purchase power is just one component of overall costs. You're also paying for linemen so that when you have outages, lines get fixed.
Your bar graph did not include the cost of the electricity, okay? But I see what the cost of the electricity is not even a major portion of your electric bill. It's the distribution, maintenance, taxes is the lion's share. That's also true of the water bill and the sewer bill, okay? That's how municipalities work. Okay, it still doesn't add up to 17 cents per kilowatt hour.
I'll be happy if you have my email address right up there. I'll be happy to walk you through in detail kind of how that rate breaks down.
I would like you to publish that for the entire community, not just for me.
Yeah, no, that's great. We can certainly do that. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. The next person on the list that had signed up is Kat Maggio. No comments, thank you. Tom Prusher? No comment. Thank you. I apologize again. Hewley Prusher? Holly maybe Prusher? Thank you. Susan Russo.
Good evening, Susan Russo, Batavia. I don't have a question, except as it's in my body of my statement, but I did want to say something tonight. I want to, first of all, thank you for the special presentation that you gave tonight to inform Geneva and Batavia residents and their elected officials about the history and organizational structure of NIMPA. This presentation did give us a basic understanding of the critical link that NIMPA serves between our electric utilities and the electricity that is delivered to us. So thank you. Missing tonight, however, was the discussion of the potential general manager position that was tabled at the December 2023 meeting. This subject raises questions. Why would NIMPA hire a general manager now after having no employees during the past 15 years? Many here tonight do not know that the discussion of hiring a general manager was an option offered by NIMPA's attorney to address the limitations placed on NIMPA by the Attorney General's office regarding its obligations under the Open Meetings Act. This development raises even more questions about the general manager position. Would the hiring of a general manager affect how NIMPA operates? Would the reports currently made during its regular meetings be eliminated from future meetings? Would there be open discussion before a vote is taken on substantive decisions? And how would the hiring of a general manager affect transparency? The special presentation tonight was intended to address public concern about NIMPA's transparency. But transparency of a public body, an essential part of the democratic principles. is not a statement about its history and organizational structure. True transparency of a public body provides citizens the opportunity to know and contribute in a meaningful way to that body's decision-making process. Tonight's meeting is the doorway to real transparency that the public deserves of NIMPA. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And the matter of the general manager will appear on our February meeting. So anyone who's interested in that topic is still just a matter of discussion amongst the board. No decisions have been made on that topic at all. But it will come back in February to the board meeting. It was tabled from the December meeting. Thank you again. Next is Daniel Russo. No question. Thank you. Gary King. William Keel.
Thank you. My name is Bill Kale, like the vegetable. I'm from Geneva.
Sorry, I apologize.
I do have 3 or 4 questions. One of them, I'm always fascinated about the issue of the bonds, and I thought we got an excellent presentation. There are the many different bonds that we do have. But I think we pay the bonds every month like a mortgage. It's the same, regardless of how much power output comes from Prairie State. The bond payments, do those go up and down every month with the output from Prairie State? Or do we pay it kind of like a mortgage where you pay the same amount every month until it's retired?
The analogy of a mortgage is more accurate. The bonds do not vary based on output from the plant.
Oh, that's what I thought. Thank you. And the next one has to do with replacement energy. I understand Prairie State runs as much as it can, probably 24 hours a day, unless it's down for maintenance or repairs, something like that, to maximize its efficiency the way it should be running. But occasionally it is down for maintenance or repairs, or the conveyor belt gets hit by a lightning bolt, or one of the boiler pipes break. Things have happened. And then we buy replacement energy. Does NIMPA buy the replacement energy, or does Prairie State have to come up with replacement energy?
Because we have an expert on that topic, I'm going to turn it over to Noah Hansen. Noah Hansen actually handles electric market stuff for operations for NIMPA. He can explain better how we go about buying replacement energy for the agency.
So NIMPA buys the replacement energy when Prairie State is not operating and has that fixed delivery obligation to each of its members. So it's purchased either on the market or bilaterally.
What does bilateral purchase of energy?
It means finding an entity who's willing to sell it at a fixed price. We haven't purchased it bilaterally for several years because the market's been an advantageous rate relative to finding a counterparty willing to sell it.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. One more is NIMPA limited in the production of energy to only supplying your community? In other words, did you actually go out and start building some renewable energy plants somewhere and create more energy than your municipalities are actually using, and then sell that on the market? If Avant was to say, we could be making money, we're a utility, why don't we build renewable energy is so expensive, why don't we build some of our own and sell it, even if it was more than the cities were using? Would that be allowed, or are you limited to only servicing your municipality?
So it would be allowed as a project. If you recall, I touched on like the Eagle View Wind project. NIMPA as an agency could explore additional projects. The 3-member communities would need to decide, however, under your scenario, is it within the municipality's role, is it within their purview, is it within their purpose to build a power plant on speculation for the purpose of financial gain and not to just serve our customers. Typically, and really almost always, government entities say that their role is to serve their citizens, not to play financial in the financial markets. But to answer your question, I don't think there's anything legally that would prevent us from doing that. It's just not something that, as a government entity, our city councils generally would want to do.
That then, just to reiterate that, that's a council prerogative, or however you would phrase that legally. This would be up to the council to decide.
The councils appoint us. We're all accountable to our city councils. If we're going to initiate a new project, each of us would, work with our city councils and get our community support before NIMPA would then proceed forward with a project.
Then I want to go back for just a moment here to the issue about the bonds and the replacement energy. At times when Prairie State's not running full blast and you're buying replacement energy and stuff, you said that the bond prices stay pretty much the same. They don't go up and down regardless of Prairie State's output. Are you suggesting that the replacement energy is also helping to pay for the bonds in the same way the Prairie State energy pays for the bonds?
I'll let David try and answer that question.
So I would say that when the Prairie State plant's not operating, NIMPA is having an expense to go out and buy that replacement energy on the market, as Noah was talking about, because NIMPA has an obligation to deliver a fixed quantity of energy to its members every hour. And so it wouldn't be a revenue source because that would be an expense of NIMPA, an extra expense. And so, when the Prairie State plant is generating, that energy is being put into the market to meet NIMPA's delivery obligations.
So I think I didn't follow that.
Okay.
Could try one more time?
Well, I think, so what I thought I heard you asking was when NIMPA is when Prairie State is not operating and NIMPA's buying energy on the market, is that revenue that's going to offset the bonds? And the answer to that question would be no. It would be an incremental expense of NIMPA because it would, as multiple people have said, the bond obligation is there regardless of whether the plant is operating in a given hour or not. It's like a mortgage. And so if NIMPA is having to go to the market to buy energy because the plant's not generating for whatever reason, that's an additional expense of NIMPA.
Thank you very much. I think we're getting closer to the truth as I can understand it now. I brought this particular issue up because at the time they were passing or contemplating passing the energy law a couple of years ago, several city representatives had expressed serious concern that if Prairie State was not running, we would not be able to pay off our bonds. And I think you just said that even when Prairie State is not operating, we still pay off our bonds.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if you've worded that maybe how it was worded back when CG was being considered. The bond obligation remains regardless of whether Prairie State is operating or not. So if Prairie State ceases operations, the bond obligation remains. There's a mortgage there on the house we have to keep paying in, but we can no longer live in that house. But we still need to supply energy to our customers. So we have to buy another house in order to supply energy to our customers. We can't just say, customers, turn off your lights. So if Prairie State's not operating anymore, we still have to pay the mortgage, the bonds, and then we have to go acquire a whole new source of power in order to serve our customers. Is that maybe what you were referring to?
Yeah, but we do that now. It's called replacement energy.
Well, but the operation of Prairie State results in a revenue. We sell the generation for Prairie State in the form of revenue. Replacement energy, we don't have any revenue coming from the electrons that we sell out of Prairie State. It's just an expense. If we just had the expense, that's essentially what would it be if Prairie State shut down. If Prairie State's not generating, it doesn't push electrons into the market. We don't get paid for those electrons. We don't get a revenue. Now we just have an expense to supply the energy to the communities. Does that make sense?
I think I'm going to need graphs and charts, so I would like to table this matter for the moment and maybe bring it up again in the future.
That's great.
So we have that. And I do have one last question. I'm not aware of the Avant group. This is new to me. I know you have like sister agencies. IMEA are contemplating having a brand new contract come up now early on, and they're telling their communities that what IMEA does is so essential that besides providing power, they also provide auxiliary services, of which I've seen a list that went up to almost 30 different items. Beyond me, I can't itemize what they all were, but they did involve things like dealing with the grid folks and dealing with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and settling a whole host of things like that that are above and beyond just buying power. And I was wondering, does Avant do all of that, or do you have, or does NIMPA have yet another group that handles all of that for you?
That's a great question. That actually circles back to local control and administration of our individual utilities. So the term is ancillary services, and each utility purchases power. Batavia purchases power through NIMPA, so do Rochelle and Geneva. They purchase power through NIMPA. They have other purchase power contracts as well. That's one whole category, okay? And that's just the purchase power category. But each community then every single day has to schedule their load into the ISO. They have to purchase and settle up in the real-time markets. They purchase energy day ahead markets. They have to do things like transmission and capacity. There's a whole host of administrative duties that are at the utility level that are not anything to do with NIMPA. They're at the utility level that every utility has to do. So yes, all three of our utilities have outside consultants who provide those ancillary services, but that's at the local level outside of NIMPA, and that's what the communities wanted, was to retain control of that. So to answer, I'm sorry, one last thing, to answer your question, and please correct me, Rochelle and Geneva, if I'm wrong, but I believe they have the Indiana Municipal Power Agency perform those services for their communities, and Batavia actually retained Avant under a complete separate contract to perform ancillary services for Batavia.
Who does that for Batavia?
Avant.
Oh, Avant. So Avant, that was kind of my question. Avant, in fact, does do all of that stuff for you.
For Batavia, under a city contract, having nothing to do with NIMPA.
Separate from NIMPA. Yeah, it's interesting to keep these things all straight. It's always a little bit tricky. Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Presentation.
I apologize. It's like Jamie Moran's, something like that, maybe.
Jamie Munoz?
Jamie Miros? Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
Alderman Paper, did you want to make any questions, or was you just signing in? Sure. Alderman Paper is a city council member from the city of Batavia, in case anyone didn't know.
We have other council members here as well. I don't recall if you said specifically, is there a date for the project meeting in February already lined up?
Actually, that's the next item on our agenda tonight.
Oh,
is to talk about the NIMPA calendar. We need to make a modification to the NIMPA calendar, because right now our calendar does not show a meeting in February. So that'll be what we talk about next, is establishing that date.
And a second question for everybody here. Is everybody going to be at that meeting? Here's hoping. Thank you.
Final person on the list tonight is Mr. Tom Carter.
Yeah, I had a question, and I think you were dancing, I didn't mean to say dancing. I think you were alluding to it earlier. As I understand it, there's a law that says Prairie State's got to cut its CO2 output by 45% by 2035, which is before the bonds are due. And so I realize this is maybe what you said. Don't ask a question about this, but I thought I'd answer it.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Anyway. Okay, so what's the current plan? We're just going to cut the output of Prairie State by 45% and just buy the power on the open market. So for a short period of time, that six-year window, we're both going to be paying for power on the open market and paying for the bonds. Is that what I think you were saying, you're coming close to saying that before.
Yeah, that essentially describes the scenario, and that is due to the fact that under the power sales agreements, NIMPA has a fixed obligation to supply its members those various megawatt levels that we showed earlier, the 55, 35, 30. So NIMPA is obligated to provide its members that amount of energy. And so just as if Prairie State was down for a maintenance outage, if Prairie State is not operating at its full capacity, NIMPA is still obligated to provide its members with that amount of energy.
hidden a miracle plan. We're just going to cut it by, short of the carbon capture thing working and a miracle happens. We're just going to cut the output by 45% per annum. We are going to pay for both the bonds and the power purchased on the open market.
That's why I wanted to say that 3 or 4 times tonight, that, yeah, NIMPA is committed to meeting all of its legal and bond obligations. So even when Prairie State production is cut, NIMPA will still be paying its bonds. That's an obligation that we have. Sure, one more before I wanted to get to anyone else in the audience who had not had a chance to speak yet.
Okay, so to follow up on that very important piece of information, is it published or can it be made available as to what the historical duty cycle of that power plant has been? For those who don't understand what duty cycle is, out of so many hours a day, how many hours of the day, every month, for all these years, has it put out the 1.2 gigawatts? Okay, I'd love to know that number, because if we're going to now start cutting it back for the last 6 years of the bond, the efficiency of this plant is horrific, and it's a money pit. Okay, and that's the way I saw it in 2007, saying like, why is Batavia investing in a coal-powered plant in southern Illinois just because a coal mine happens to be right next door? It's just poor expenditure of our funds. It's just super disappointing. And it sounds like we are stuck with it.
So I'm going to either point to Steve Allen or Noah or Joe to answer your question. I believe the Energy Information Administration, EIA, tracks power plant performance and historic power plant performance. Yeah, so I think that information is out there.
So if I send you an email this week, which I'll probably do tonight, by the end of the week or next month, I'll get an answer?
I can track it down through one of these experts to be able to track down as much of the historic information as we can.
Efficiency, at Fermilab, how many hours the efficiency of the lab was running when we're paying to have it run? If it gets down to 50%, that's just kind of like not worth doing.
I'm over my skis now, but my understanding is every generator in the United States reports to the EIA, the Energy Information Administration, and that information is all kept and is publicly available. So I will do my best through my experts to track that information down. All right, I did see a couple other hands go up. Yep.
Hi, I'm Betsy Thielen-Zinzer, and I'm from Batavia, and it's nice to see some old friendly faces here. My question is about a comment that currently in Springfield, there's some discussion about new legislation that would affect the power agencies, and I was wondering what that legislation is and what your personal opinion is of this legislation.
My understanding is that legislation hasn't been introduced yet, so I can't comment on it. It hasn't been introduced. There was a version introduced last year, and its understanding is that it's going to be coming back this year. But I short of not knowing what it's even going to say, I can't comment. Well, last year's general topic had to do with like citizen representation on municipal boards or on joint action agency boards. That was last year's general topic. What this year's topic or topics plural will be, I do not know.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
I lied. My name is Patty Lackman, and I am from Batavia. We are 7.6% of Prairie State, correct?
NIMPA is, yes.
NIMPA.
Yep.
And we've heard about IMEA, correct? That's how much?
I don't remember what IMEA's percentage is.
Yeah. Okay, Richard, I think you've got the numbers right there.
Yeah, I mean...
He's looking at his computer, so I'm thinking he's got the answer.
I don't know who he's looking. Are you looking at me? Or David's looking.
David's trying to look it up really quick. They are about
it's about twice as much.
Yeah, about twice as much. I don't know their exact
See, if you were at a League of Women Voters event, you would have the right names in front of you. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I am definitely not Ellen.
Okay. Well, we know about NIMPA. We know about IMEA. How many other of those little power agencies are part of Prairie State?
There's 9 owners total.
How many?
9 owners total.
9 owners. So
And
We're
some in
two.
other states.
Yeah, some in
as
other
well,
states,
Just to
yeah.
point out.
you're one,
Yeah.
we're one, IMEA is one,
Correct.
so there's 7 more.
Right.
Right.
Do they have these issues? Do you meet with them? Do you discuss some of the stuff that we're bringing to you with them as a group? Or do we all have 9 agencies operating independently with Prairie State?
So you ask a couple of complicated questions there.
Now, I'm the least complicated person in this room because I don't know anything about the energy stuff. But the management stuff is what I'm kind of
Right, and
interested.
it is actually very complicated, and I'm gonna make it really simple if I can. Each owner of Prairie State is an owner of a power plant. We all own our percentage share of Prairie State. So as owners, we're interested in the power plant operations, the power plant maintenance and maintenance and longevity, the power plant's capital improvements, the power plant strategic planning. As owners, we all get together and discuss those issues related to the power plant. You asked kind of the second half of that question is the agency-related part of that question. And as owners, we're all operating our own independent agencies. And there gets to be antitrust and federal laws in there because we all deal in competitive marketplaces, the wholesale energy markets. And we can't collude. You know, we can't come together and say, you set your price at this and we'll set our price at that and we'll bid it into the market, because that would be collusion. So that's why there are a whole host of things that the owners do not work together on under federal antitrust rules. There are things that we do work together on because we're joint owners in a generation facility. I hope that answered your question.
I'm not sure it does. Do you meet with the other 7, 8 groups?
Yes.
Do you discuss issues like we are discussing tonight?
No, because tonight we're having a discussion about NIMPA as an agency. So when we meet with the other owners, we discuss things like the X-ray sorter at the coal mine. We discuss things like
Operational things.
Exactly. How to own our asset and to maintain our asset.
Thank you.
Anyone have a lion's share of the company?
The largest owner of Prairie State is AMP Ohio.
What percentage do they have?
I don't know what their percentage is off the top of my head.
What's the percentage of the largest owner of the 9?
It's not, I think the largest might be, maybe 20 might be the largest. I think IMEA, and this is just from memory, 15%, AMP maybe 18 to 20%. Those are the 2 largest owners. Mudgmug, Missouri, which is Joint Action Agency, Missouri, a little bit under 15%. Then there's the 2 Illinois co-ops, right?
SIPC.
Right.
Prairie Power.
Prairie Power.
Is it,
And IMPA, the Indiana Municipal
it'd
Power
also be
Agency.
interesting to know then, because no one has a majority share, what is we must know who owns the bonds. It'd be very interesting to know.
They each own their own
We each
bonds.
own our own
Each were
bonds.
independently.
We each bonded
No,
separately.
we all have our own bonds, but someone has to buy those bonds in order to collect the money to put it up.
Right, but each of them, actually, in the case of the co-ops, they weren't even municipally financed. They were probably financed by RUS. But the joint action agencies, Mudgmug, AMP, we don't know how they finance them. I mean, that's one of those areas of separation.
So there could be some fat cat out there that's
I doubt it.
buying these kind of things up.
I mean, they were basically they're sold in the open market.
It sounds like a cash cow for the next 25 years.
Well, municipal bonds are a good thing to invest in.
Municipal bonds used to be, at times they've been bad investments, at times they've been really good investments.
Yeah.
So, yeah. There's another hand up.
Go ahead, Dan.
Hi, I'm Daniel Russo. I see on the list of consultants and advisors, there's advocacy from Van Buren Consulting, which I assume is a lobbyist. And I just wondered what kind of lobbying work NIMPA needs.
A good example would be the legislation that I just cited. So on behalf of the agency, The agency represents essentially about 60,000 citizens between our three communities. And so, as an agency, we advocate for agency matters. And if is there legislation that would be proposed that will impact the agency, those are the things that we would be interested in.
Kat Maggio, Batavia. In the interest of transparency, I was wondering if there was a reason that the NIMPA website is not indexed by search engines, and if that could be remedied.
That's a good technical question. I don't know. Yeah.
So Avant manages the NIMPA's website, and we can certainly look into that. That's not a conscious decision that's been made. I guess I thought that was something that they sort of crawled the web and did. I didn't think that was something you had to put yourself out there to do, but we can certainly look into that.
Just one more, another question that come to my mind is when the board members of NIMPA are functioning as NIMPA, is there fiduciary responsibility to Prairie State or to the city of Batavia?
So the board members have fiduciary responsibility to their individual municipalities.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I really appreciate the feedback and the questions and the comments, and everyone really just having a very good conversation tonight. So that is very much appreciated. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for attending. Representative, thank you for coming tonight, and online as well. Representative, thank you. We appreciate you being here. You're welcome to stick around. I don't think there's a whole lot left to our meeting. We do need to decide when we're going to have a meeting in February. That'll be the next item. But if anyone wants to get up, I'll just take a pause right now if you do want to leave. If not, we'll go on to the next item. So thank you.
Thank you.
I would just ask, though, if you're going to stick around, you're welcome to go out in the lobby and talk. We do just have to finish up our meeting, so. Thank you. We're good. You're good too. Thank you. All right, everybody, again, we do need to finish up our meeting. So if you do wish to leave, you're welcome to head out to the lobby. I have the power tonight. I don't need a gavel.
That's a good answer. Some of this stuff is so technical. It's just hard calls.
Go ahead, bang the gavel.
Dominic, thank you for coming tonight.
I didn't calculate, but yeah.
No, I pulled up my bill.
At this point, I just start talking.
If you did it.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're going to hop to our next item on the agenda, and that is a revision to the 2024 meeting schedule for consideration of a February meeting. NIMPA's published 2024 meeting schedule does not include a meeting in February. It was contemplated that business meeting would occur tonight in combination with this information session.
I think if people are talking in the audience, it's going to make it hard for the members of the audience who want to hear the business meeting. So if we could just stop the talking in the audience, or if you would like to continue talking, if you want to move to the
lobby,
vestibule.
please. Thank you.
Thank you. No. There we go. It's quiet.
All right, thank you, everybody, for your cooperation. Again, if you want to stick around, you're more than welcome to. If you want to leave, go talk, please do so out in the lobby. I was saying that our 2024 calendar did not contemplate a meeting in February because we had contemplated doing a regular business meeting tonight, but then in the interest of wanting to make the presentation, more emphasis on the presentation, we decided to not have a regular business meeting tonight. So with that, we do need to make a revision to the 2024 meeting schedule for a February meeting. If everyone, the board members are here, if you could please check your calendars. I know that I have availability. This will be on a Thursday at 10:30, which is NIMPA's standard time for meeting. I do have availability in February on the 12th, which would be a Monday, all at 10:30. I'm sorry, I just said Thursday, but all at 10:30 a.m. is what I meant to say. The 14th, 15th, the 19th, the 21st, or the 22nd. So those are the dates that we can consider. Does anyone have any on those dates that are just conflicts between NIMPA's board or advisors?
My only availability is on the 22nd.
Your only availability is on the 22nd?
If it's at 10:30, I would suggest, and I don't want to put a wrench in anybody's schedules, but if, you know, it sounds like folks want to come and listen and hear the discussion about the general manager, I would suggest we have I would suggest we have the meeting at night. If we're going to have it during the day, I can only do the 22nd.
All right. How is everyone's availability on the 22nd?
Well, I'm available on the 22nd.
I am too.
Everybody?
Any time.
You're available on that date, Jeff? Yes, sir. All right. Unless anyone objects, I will go ahead and make a motion to modify NIMPA's 2024 meeting schedule calendar to have a meeting on February 22nd at 10:30 a.m. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. And just a little discussion before we take a vote. My only hesitancy, Jeff, regarding having night meeting deals with the fact that we already have city council meetings, committee of the whole meetings. I've got bicycle commission meetings. Yeah. I've got a number of other meetings in the evening that I'm already committed to through my role with the city. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. I'll call for a roll call. Gary Holm, aye.
Aaron Holton, aye.
Jeff Hagenshue, yes.
I should have done that, sorry. So that motion passes. We will have a meeting then on February 22nd at 10:30 a.m. And it'll be here in Batavia.
We'll be at City Hall.
City Hall. So 10:30 a.m., February 22nd, here in Batavia. All right. Next item on the agenda is old business. As was mentioned tonight, the tabled matters will be at that February meeting. Is there any new business? Any other comments from the board tonight?
I want to compliment you and Richard and David and everybody involved. That was a great presentation, so kudos.
Thank you. And any other comments from the public tonight? Come on up.
For the February 22nd meeting, will it be recorded and distributed on the website?
So we audio record our meetings. Tonight we did this presentation purposefully on BATV, but every meeting by law is audio recorded. One of the things through hiring Elizabeth was to help us to better communicate out through our website and to create board packets. And so that is a step that we're taking towards, is to be able to have board packets and be more kind of like what we do in Batavia. That's the whole point of getting an administrative and secretarial person on board, is to be able to start generating those packets that can then be in a PDF that can then go on our website. So to answer your question, that is where we're headed as an agency. There's no recording like BATV that'll be on the website of the 22nd meeting.
But there will be an audio recording.
There's an audio recording that's always available. That's required by law. So if anyone wants that, they certainly can have it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other comments?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Seconded.
All right, motion by Jeff, second by Aaron. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, and we are adjourned. Again, thank you, everyone.
And